It's a hell of a question. I don't know. I think it just is a credit to him and the amount of work that he's put in and the type of player he is. He's showing everybody who he is and what he can be. I thought he did a lot of great things tonight. Well, you guys knew going into this thing that he's been battling through a throwing shoulder injury. So I just think that speaks to the type of competitor that Malik Willis is. I mean, he's as tough as anybody. He made play after play after play out there. He was one of the few bright spots, I would say, on the night in regards to what he was able to do. I thought he made plays. He threw the ball accurately. And, it was kind of a crazy week in regards to him not getting really any reps. Missed a day being sick, came back. He was dialed in, man, and I thought he played outstanding. Yeah, he's given us a lot of confidence, and I think it's a credit to him. I thought he played an outstanding game going in Chicago a week ago. So, he is unflappable. Like, he is as calm as they come, and just is a resilient dude. I can't say enough great things about Malik.
Let's go now, a little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host at SteeDDNFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. You and I, let's sit down and let's get through this together. This was the biggest loss point-wise by the Packers this season. I want to sort of start off with some positive things, some obvious things, but there's no, again, kind of like the last, because this is the third loss in a row, right? We can't sugarcoat this and pretend that it's something that it isn't. But again, I always try to not blindly barrel into some sort of a match description that fits other people's narratives, which is exactly why I don't listen to or read articles or podcasts, whatever, particularly before I do my own, because usually I do this straight after the game. So with that being said, I don't want to pee off anybody by pretending that this wasn't an abysmal game, but I think if we put it into context, we can see how it got out of hand. So to sort of call it out from the beginning, if you let a team put up 41 points, you're not going to surmount that. Also, if you allow one player be as dominant as they were in Derrick Henry, well, then this is how it's going to pan out. There's no excuses for Matt LaFleur, but I would say Jeff Hafley in particular, because Matt LaFleur was asked that question in the press conference. You knew this was going to be a run-heavy game. And why? And is that true? And he said yes. And they said, well, why weren't you prepared for it then? And that's a valid question, and that's directed at both coaches. But a thing that comes up time and time again, I feel, is a misunderstanding as to what the head coach, what Matt LaFleur actually does, for one, and what the head coach in general actually does. And this was borne out by when the kicker wasn't doing well. And they said to Matt LaFleur, what do you say to the kicker? And he says, well, I don't talk to kickers. Right, and people took that as in to say, like, oh, he doesn't talk to the peasants, and that's not the case. Like, Matt LaFleur usually will deal with his offensive and defensive coordinator, and then he might deal with some of the other assistant coaches, but typically a head coach, no matter who they are, typically don't, and again, depending on the leaning, right, they wouldn't get out and speak to the special teams guys and say, listen, not unless it was really egregious. And that's exactly why Mike McCarthy handed over play calling duties at one stage during his coaching tenure in Green Bay, because it was such a shambles and he wasn't going to get the chance to correct it. So he just said, screw it, I'm going to do it myself. So he did that, and he handed over the play calling to Tom Clements. So it's the same as in this case. So with Matt LaFleur, the way he operates is, and this is quite common, is that they will hand over the responsibility. And now again, ultimately the responsibility falls to him. I'm not giving him a get out of jail free card here. He's ultimately responsible. So if the performance isn't doing well, and I think one criticism that we've all had, including me, in Green Bay, is that he keeps defensive coordinators around far too long. We saw it with Mike Pettin when it wasn't working, Joe Barry when it wasn't working. But Matt LaFleur, and some people go the opposite way, the likes of Vrabel and all that. Matt LaFleur is an offensive-minded coach, And he has admitted himself time and time again, and it's not a massive admission, right, because this is quite common, is that he lets the defensive coordinator handle that side of the ball. So Matt LaFleur allows Jeff Hafley to run the defense on game day and to run the defense throughout the week. And yes, he reports to him and he comes in and they set up a game plan and they try coordinate it together. But Matt LaFleur is preoccupied with the offensive side of the ball, the quarterback room, and particularly when you have an instance where you have the backup quarterback coming in. So this was a failing, of course, on Matt LaFleur because he's ultimately responsible, but also Jeff Hafley. And of course, the narrative out there is always fire Matt LaFleur or fire Jeff Hafley. Like, just this gremlin behaviour, can we just calm the hell down? You know, after a couple of bad games or whatever, you know, it's like sack this player, get rid of that player, he's useless, you know, these coaches useless, whatever. They're absolutely at fault, right? But can we just stop for a second? Can we just stop? You know, the minute it goes wrong and then you're calling for everyone just to be sacked out of the place, it isn't good enough. And the thing is, this game went one-sided really quickly. But I found, for the most part, the offense was doing well, and that was all because of the majesty that is Malik Willis. And I want to dedicate a little while to Malik Willis and just how ridiculous he is. Let's put it all into perspective. He was the third string for Tennessee. He had 2 weeks' notice, came into Green Bay, and has impressed since then. So this isn't some sort of a maturing of Malik Willis, although there will be an element of that to it too. He's obviously going to get better with more reps that he has, more experience in the playbook and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that this is Malik Willis as a guy and as a player. I just think that he's outstanding. Coming into this game in particular, he had a shoulder injury on his throwing shoulder, which is no mean feat. We've seen guys with injuries to their left hand when they're right-handed, and it still impacts the handoff of the ball and all this kind of stuff. But he had an injury to his throwing shoulder, and when you go down through all of the long passes that he made, third and 18, a 30-yard pass in the second half to Jaden Reed, and then a 31-yard pass to Christian Watson. He started off the game on a deep pass to Romeo Doubs, and you have to give props to Romeo Doubs and that to be able to pull that thing in. He's scrambling around by design or by he's getting flushed out of the pocket. He's absolutely outstanding. There was a 3rd and 9 play where he scrambled for a first down to bring up 1st and goal. And again, I'll reiterate, he's the backup quarterback in Green Bay, which means that his practice time is not and would never be with the ones. So all of this stuff of, he's scout teaming, he's practicing with the 2nd, 3rd stringers here all the time. The Packers do not have the time, per the CBA and also just actual time constraints, to let him get any reps with the first teamers. So all of the work that he's been doing has been on his own. He's been studying the plays, he's been going through his practice, and it's just a thing of, Jordan Love goes out, right, you're in. You can't really plan for that. Now, I always had this sort of philosophy that should you not try and incorporate your 2nd string quarterback into the game plan more, which is absolute wishful thinking on my part, because the reality of the situation is, and this is what I'm saying, this is the exact reason why Matt LaFleur does not talk to kickers, is because you only have to, a great video to look at to illustrate this is look at John Gruden. And I can't remember what he calls it, but it's a recent enough on his channel where he goes through sort of a week in the life of an NFL coach. And he used to get up at 3:17 in the morning, and he wouldn't even have time to do an awful lot of things that he wanted to get done. He would look at plans, he'd get his game plan down, he'd talk to his offensive and defensive coordinators. He might get a chance to pop his head in and say 1 or 2 things. He'd have team meetings, he'd be sacking off the last week that happened and just preparing for the new one. He's feverishly doing that, getting the plays he likes down, talking to his quarterback, asking what plays he likes, and so on and so forth. So they wouldn't have had time to go to Malik Willis and get him prepared. So he's got a shoulder injury. He's a 2nd stringer. He's got limited experience with all of these players that he has to come in on game time and do. And it certainly seemed in this game, and they really pressed Matt LaFleur on this in the post-match presser. Did you call down a watered-down game? Because it didn't seem like it, that you called the offense for a guy who didn't sort of be looked at like he was the 2nd stringer. He was the starter. And he agreed to it and said that's just the type of guy Malik Willis is. Not only that, Malik Willis, because of the shoulder injury, got 0 reps during the week. When he was due to get some reps, he had flu-like symptoms and was out. And I don't know about you, but man flu is more destructive than a shoulder injury. We know this. I've had it myself. So he's had no reps all week. And then he comes in and the first play of the game, and they said to LaFleur, I mean, were you going for the deep shot on first down? And he had a roundabout answer, but the answer to cut through the BS is no, right? It's an option. Dobbs is going to be running the route. Of course, it's written into the play, but it isn't predetermined because obviously you have to take what the defense gives you. Malik Willis was able to diagnose that Dobbs was one-on-one down the sideline and had got the step with a good route and made the throw. And Dobbs, credit to him, absolutely, a man who was much maligned for, fumbling the ball, both figuratively and everything else, against the Bears. He comes down with that play, and that wasn't the only showing from Dobbs. So I cannot say enough good things about Malik Willis. The only unfortunate thing, obviously, is the fact that this is the last year we're going to see him in Green Bay, because he's going to get signed to a different squad and he's going to be paid probably colossal money, and he deserves it. Now, all of the people talking about, he's better than Jordan Love and all of this type of stuff. Look, I'm not going to... I, on the face of it, I can say it's all rubbish, but I'm not going to say it because, look, we don't have enough sample size. I do think, in his own right, Malik Willis is an outstanding quarterback. And I think if things had gone differently in Green Bay, where Jordan Love was so-so, which he isn't, I think he's outstanding. But if he was in any way so-so, I think it would be a legitimate argument. But the long and short of it is that you don't pay Jordan Love the money that you pay him. He is performing at an extremely high level. The only thing is that he doesn't get the sexy coverage that everyone else does. Malik Willis has that hype because he's coming in and doing the things when he's not expected to do them. But I will say to anybody calling for Jordan Love versus Malik Willis, I think it's a bit of a bogus argument because it'll never happen due to the financials. But I will say is that I also admire Malik Willis, not to supplant Jordan Love, but I think in his own right it's great. So look, let's get on to the game. So what happened here? If you didn't watch the game because you didn't stay up late and you've heard enough people moaning about it online, and you don't want to watch it, and you're going to look at the scoreline and you see it's 41-24 and go, well, it was a blowout, the Packers were crap, everyone got injured, everyone had the flu. If they didn't have the flu, they were broken. So let's just not watch it. Derrick Henry was just untackled the whole game and let to do what he wanted to do, which is only half right. Let's look at the game, actually how it fell. To put it in perspective, in the fourth quarter, the Packers had this game at 27-24. That's one thing to say. Also, they lost the game in the first half. So, yes, the second half was unfortunate, and that's where they put the game away, and they squandered as much as you can squander trailing a team by 3 points. But they squandered that opportunity, and at the very end, they'll go through a very, very quick sort of drive summary of 3 points, and they let them get back into the game. But again, that is compounded by the fact that Malik Willis, on throwing the ball to Christian Watson, dynamite throw as usual, injured his throwing shoulder, and so he went out, and then Tune came in and they just couldn't get the ball going. At the end of the day, the defense didn't do a good enough job, obviously, to let them notch up 41 points, and Derrick Henry to have a historic day, one of many historic days that he's had in his career. And the Packers were only going to have to try and outscore the Baltimore Ravens by the end of it, and they simply couldn't do it. Also, they just busted and whiffed on a number of defensive plays that allowed them to get back into it, which I'll kind of dig into it. The one thing I do want to call out, though, Derrick Henry is a very good football player, right? And I know you can get fooled by some of the recent games, and anybody who's had him in fantasy, he's been sort of hot and cold sometimes. But this was a perfect storm for the Packers in a number of different ways. One of those ways was that Derrick Henry wasn't utilised in the fourth quarter of the game last week, which was all the media were talking about. So this was always going to be a game, because it's a cold weather game, because they have their backup quarterback in, that they were going to try go to Derrick Henry time and time again. Which you can look at it two ways. Like, one, it's awful because you know what's coming and you still can't defend it. Or second off, know that they were going to persist with him regardless. Now, he was pulling down 7.1 yards per carry against the Patriots despite being sort of sidelined for the fourth quarter. So it was a perfect storm in that sense that their best player was going to get all the attention from their offensive coordinator and head coach, and that's exactly what happened, and the Packers simply didn't have any answers for him. I mean, there was, and again, that was not only the case for Derrick Henry, us against the run to begin with was awful. Now, Brooks came in the second half, and I will say it looks like they made adjustments in the second half because the Packers went in trailing by 10 points, I believe, in the half. And again, by extrapolating out the points, the Ravens should have put a 50-burger on us. They were bloody close, but they didn't, and they kind of got, if you can call it, garbage time scores at the very end. And you can sort of boil those down to individual bad plays. But I put out a couple of tweets just before the podcast and calling them tail of the tape, where there was just really egregious defensive plays. And I'm not calling out these defensive players because I think it's on the entire defense and the coaching staff, right? But there was one where Keyshawn Nixon had blown up Mitchell in the backfield, and he ended up going for 14 yards on a first down. There's another one where Derrick Henry gets the ball, and from about 5 yards away, Javon Bullard launches himself through the air and whiffs on him. I think by the time he gets to him, he just hits his helmet against his leg, and Derrick Henry's gone. But again, there's enough defenders around to put him down. In fact, Cooper almost had him and then had to chase him down and get him by what the comms called a shoelace at the very end of it. So it was egregious on the defense for an awful lot. Again, not all bad. I thought McKinney put in a good shift. Brooks was stout in the second half. I thought Lucas Van Ness was quite good as well. Rashan Gary, again, in this game, when he has the support of other players, he can get purchased, whereas he's really obviously feeling the impact of Micah Parsons being out. But basically put, if you don't want to watch this game, it was the defense whiffed massively against Derrick Henry and against they gouged us as well on the short passing game. There was no long passes in this game. It was short passes, but it was consistently getting purchased time and time again. I mean, not to get into it, but, our first defensive stand, if you can call it a stand, started off with a 9-yard pass, then a 12-yard run, which was a sign of things to come. Then on a single play, Huntley stumbles around, escapes Rashan Gary, makes Wooden miss, and then picks up a first down. Then the Ravens convert a 3rd and 6 after a penalty. Then another third down to almost get a touchdown where Evan Williams had a free shot at him. And this is kind of the tail of the tape up until the second half. We could not get him into 3rd and long situations. We could not stop the short passing game. We couldn't stop Derrick Henry at all. And that's in his ridiculous 200 yards or whatever it was. And then on top of that, because they were getting purchased with the run, the clock was running down. So their first drive zapped up 8 minutes. Then it comes to us. So we're on offense and we're kind of a victim of our own success, really. Because in the first offensive drive, like I said, Willis comes out, first pass, 40 yards to Romeo Dobbs. They set it up as kind of a run play, even they bring in an extra offensive lineman, so that was great. Then it's a 1st and 20, and Willis goes to Watson for a 39-yard touchdown. But sandwiched in between that is 2 back-to-back penalties, one for 12 men on the field and one for a false start on Aaron Banks, which is the first of 2 penalties on Aaron Banks. Now, it didn't matter, right, because we ended up going for that touchdown. But that's the sort of how this game got away from us. We became completely one-sided. We did not have the time to run the ball. We didn't have Josh Jacobs healthy enough to run the ball. Malik Willis was an absolute hero when he ran the ball, but that's sort of judging it by when he escaped. And in fact, 2 of his touchdowns were identical, which is insane to say he got 2 rushing touchdowns. But he went to hand the ball off to Chris Brooks and pulled the ball out at the very last second and then made the run himself. Very good quarterback play, and also showed that the only way for us to get the run off is through trickery, and that's exactly what he did. But that's what it comes down to. Couldn't get them in 3rd and long. When we did get them in 3rd down situations in the second half, we coughed it up and allowed multiple 3rd down conversions, and particularly on the 7th defensive stand. On their touchdown, Carrington Valentine was caught napping. That was the same drive where he got stiff-armed into next week by Derrick Henry, which is no mean feat. We've seen plenty of shame videos online, and that's what it was. They just ran the game out, zapped up the time of possession. We scored very quickly when we did. And then in the first half, we had 2 absolutely bum drives on offense that didn't help. We had a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and a half a yard, actually. And we couldn't get that going with Malik Willis with the sneaker. And then we had a 4th and inches, and we couldn't get that with Josh Jacobs. Gave them a short field. But that's the mad part of all of this game, is that when we did sort of cough it up, and then in the next offensive possession, it was that rancid snap. And to give a bit of background to that, we had Malik Willis canning the play and audibling out of it, and the snap was snapped. And you'd look at that, and the first question I ask is, whose fault is that? Did he pop his leg down or give the signal to snap the ball when he shouldn't have? And no, they didn't, because as Matt LaFleur said in the post-match presser, he didn't even get his cadence off. So that was just a bad operation, he called it, without wanting to call out the centre, right? But that's what it was. So we had 2 bum plays on the offense to give them a really short field, and they only came away with field goals after that. And like I said, this game seems like an awful lot more out of reach than it actually was, with the fact that it was 27-24, and we just let the game get away from us in the end. But that's because of Malik Willis's injury. We couldn't go and keep up that level of scoring, and then just the brain fart stuff at the end by the defense. A couple of other things to note: Nate Hobbs on returns absolutely wasn't it. In the first half, there was just long punishing drives by Baltimore. As I said, the 2 short fields actually only ended up in field goals. The Packers had 4 possessions, wasted 2 of them, and then scored quickly in another 2, which is going to gas your defense. In the second half, we had a stouter D. Looks like we made sort of halftime adjustments. But it's the craziest stat really to come out of these last couple of games is that there's been 3 games this season that a team that hasn't punted has lost, and all of those 3 belong to Green Bay. And in fact, it was so sort of insane that Matt LaFleur came in one of the last games and said this is the first time in his career, I think it was, or second, of his entire career where he's been involved in a game where you didn't punt the ball and you still lose. And then on top of that, we scored 24 points, which is enough to win some of the games that we won this year or lost this year. Finally, we get the Ravens in 3rd and long, in the second half, and they go and punt. But then we were so far behind in the 3rd and 4th quarter, not points wise, but just by the fact that they'd put up that score already and we had to match it, is that we'd kind of lost the plot. And by the time Tune came in, and again, even that interception on that drive, the pass was in and out of the hands of Bo Melton, right? So again, they give up that, and then the Ravens get it and go down the field again. And in credit to the Ravens, like Matt LaFleur said, they controlled the game from start to finish. So how I would describe the game: Malik Willis, hero game. Hopefully Jordan Love is at a concussion protocol. But what we're looking at now is we cannot win the division, which was our path from the 7th seed to the 2nd seed. So the way it's looking now is that the Bears will secure the 2nd seed potentially, and we'll have to face them in the playoffs at Soldier Field. Which, to be honest, if we can get some players back a little bit healthier, it's not a bad thing, because again, as I've said countless times, we've beaten the Bears once, we've given the win to them on the last game. So if there's one team that we can beat in the playoffs, it's going to be the Chicago Bears. Now we'll see how they do against the Niners, but what we wanted to happen was for us to beat the Ravens and the Vikes, and then for them to lose 2. But I would agree with people certainly asking the question and the sentiment of, we're in the playoffs, what the hell are we going to be able to do in the playoffs? I mean, injury-wise alone has been pretty shocking. And defense alone, if we put in a performance like that, which, again, you're going to meet the good teams. I mean, Baltimore are clawing for their chance to get into the playoffs. So we're going to come up against teams that are far better than Baltimore when we get into the playoffs, which we are now in. So the question is do we play... Because we're stuck in the 7th seed, right? Do we play our starters in this next game? And we've seen when we get our first round bye and everything's going great and you rest your players, we come in and get spanked, right? So do you play them on risk injury to keep them warmed up because they're going to be playing the following week? Do you sit them out for a week? With the injuries that they have, I think the best shot we have is to rest players, because I don't see the point. But again, that usually works against all of... the sort of the philosophy that coaches go by. I don't really want to get into the play-by-play. I think you probably tune out, right? I think it all comes down to, just as I said, we had 4 possessions in the first half, 2 were duds, 1 with a bad snap, 1 by giving the ball over on downs on our, I think, what was it, our 30 or 40 yard line. And then after that, then it was really commendable stuff by Malik Willis, but then the defense did enough to lose it. If there was one drive that I want to call out, it would be the 7th defensive drive in the second half. It was a 3rd and 5 and we allow a 9-yard run. Now, I understand that because when you're on 3rd and medium, yeah, you wouldn't typically expect that to be a run play, particularly because first and second down on that play, on that drive, were passes, and they'd only got 5 yards. But they gave it to Derrick Henry and he got it. So you kind of go, all right, I'll let you off with that one. I understand that's a bit of trickery. You trusted in Derrick Henry. They were doing a commendable enough job in the second half by stuffing Derrick Henry an awful lot more. But unfortunately, on 1st and 10 on the very next play, Henry goes for 30. And that ended up being his longest run of the game. And like I said, Bullard had a key on him, decides instead of meeting him at the waist, launches himself from 4 or 5 yards away, and it does nothing. Then they let Huntley pick up the first down on 3rd and 4. So again, that's the second or third down on this drive. Then it's 3rd and 8. The Packers have a free rusher, but then Valentine is absolutely awful in coverage, allows the wide receiver to eke out and make the play. So, and again, I hear people calling for Valentine's head and all that kind of stuff. I haven't been his biggest fan the last couple of games. And particularly, he absolutely whiffed on that touchdown. So, I'm a Colin Freak's head? No, but it was bad play. And then the 8th defensive stand, I mean, this is what they had to do to sort of, and again, it looked an awful lot better than it was because, in fact, the Packers offense come out after that. Willis gets a scramble for 5 yards. Dobbs catches for a first down. There's a 10-yard Willis scramble again for first down. And then he goes to Watson for a 7-yard play, which he gets injured on. Tune comes out, Melton spills it, and then the game's effectively over because the Ravens come out again on 3rd and 5. Henry gets a 12-yard run right up the middle, and then it's 4th and inches. It's a neutral zone infraction, which gives them a first down. And then it's 3rd and 5. We allow a scramble for a first down. And then it's a 25-yard touchdown by Derrick Henry for his 4th touchdown on the day. Our offense comes out, it's just over a minute left in the game. It doesn't go anywhere. So it really put it to bed on the last 2 defensive drives by giving up really egregious 3rd and 4th downs with penalties or just brain fire plays. So we weren't going to go anywhere. So look, from looking at some of the individual plays with the tail of the tape that I put on Twitter, it looks very bad, right? To recap it again, it doesn't seem that bad. To say that, they had all of the time of possession. They basically dared us to throw the ball. We did, and we were very successful. But again, that didn't do us any favours because our defence was getting gassed with the amount of injuries and flu-like symptoms that we had out there with our number one running back on a snap count. And when he came in was ineffective, not through any fault of his own. I think Malik Willis absolutely put the team on his back and did enough. This was probably a better game, up until that point than it was against the Bears, where we were just literally giving the game away. At least it was a bit of fight here. And again, lastly, I'll say, I see Matt LaFleur being criticised about his postseason presser, or postseason, jeez, we're getting ahead of ourselves. His post-game presser by saying, look, I need to go back and look at the tape and to see what positions we're putting himself in, because he's not zeroed in on it. And people are saying, he's completely disinterested when they're on defense. I see him staring at his tablet. That's just the way he is. He's an offensive-minded coach. It was up to Jeff Hafley to put something in. But how many people can stop Derrick Henry? I mean, some people are successful. In fact, in the second half, when we actually looked like we were keying in on him, we were very successful. But they were so scared of the pass on some of these 3rd downs then that, they gave up an awful lot to Derrick Henry when they shouldn't have. But anyway, the game got away from us, much like some of our drafts have in the past. We couldn't run the ball. We didn't have time, or we didn't have the personnel. Malik Willis was doing great. He went out injured. We couldn't outscore them because of what our defense had done in the first half. And that's it. Game, set, and match. So the way I would see this going is to rest your players for the final game of the season. Try get lads back healthy and just see what you can do in the playoffs. At this juncture, it doesn't look positive, but you really never know. Because at the end of the day, the Packers had a backup quarterback with limited to no reps. And he came in and did a good job. We still have Dobbs. Watson is back, firing on all cylinders. Reed is still in the mix. And when we can run the offense the way we want to, when we're not made one-dimensional with just having the pass, then maybe we can actually get something going. But I know that's not what you want to hear right now. So anyway, I don't know what the quick snaps is going to be on the run-up. Because God knows if they'll even show their hand, whether they'll play a full complement, because the Vikings, which is our last game, are a pretty tough team defensively. So you certainly don't want to get punished any more than we are. But look, don't lose faith. We're in the playoffs. Again, we're having to use the 7th seed to get in and do anything. But consolation might be that we come up against the Bears. Now again, that might mean that they whip us in the playoffs, and that gives them even more bragging rights. But again, credit to them. They went from the bottom of the NFC North to the very top, and that's been confirmed now with this loss. So each of their own. Would it be extra sweet if we beat them? Yeah, it would. Really would. But anyway, Packers till we die and all that melodramatic nonsense. I'm at Steady the NFL. We've been at UK Packers. Hope you had an absolutely wonderful Christmas. And we'll be back to talk to you in the new year. But until then, go Pack, go.